Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. Tomorrow is American Thanksgiving, and I'll have something to say about that in just a minute. Happy Thanksgiving to all my American friends, first of all. But going back to my problems with Twitter, I noticed today that I got several people unfollowing me who I'm 99% sure would not have done so. So I have a favor to ask of my listeners, which is if you listen to the show and you like the show, I'd appreciate it if you would follow me on Twitter if you have not done so already. And my Twitter handle is @KMG of Victoria. Jonathan Pohl, Professor Pohl says, follow me on Twitter too. Excellent idea. Let's talk about Michael Schur. You've probably seen some of his productions. He wrote for The Office, was a producer there, and he played Dwight Schrute's cousin Mose, who lived out on the Beat farm. And he was the co-creator with Greg Daniels of Parks and Recreation, co-creator of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and he is a big baseball fan. And I suppose I knew of him from The Office at the same time that I was reading his blog, which was called Fire Joe Morgan. Joe Morgan being the Hall of Fame baseball player who'd become a commentator, and Schur, and who still calls himself on the internet, Ken Tremendous. They did not like Joe Morgan, particularly his ignorance of what are called sabermetrics, that is the stats of baseball. Schur, of course, is also the creator of quite possibly the smuggest sitcom in American history, The Good Place, which wrapped up, it starred Kristen Bell, Ted Jansen, the odious Jamila Jamil, and 4 seasons of that. Parks and Recreation. Let's see. How would I describe Parks and Recreation? That it would be a wish fulfillment series for wine ants. It starred Amy Poehler as quite possibly the most annoying lead on any, again, it's hyperbole day here, on any American sitcom ever. And at the end of the show, she has triplets and she marries her dream man. And she worshipped Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Joe Biden, of all people. She played this officious bureaucrat called Leslie Knope. And I remember I got burned out on the show because it got stupider and stupider. And so her dream man, who is in politics like her, she has to give him a test before she will agree to marry him. And the test is a treasure hunt. And the test is, it's an impossible treasure hunt. And of course, in anything resembling real life, Adam Scott, I believe, was her affianced. He would have said, "Oh my God, I've just realized that this woman is a nightmare. I have to get out of here right now." But instead, Adam Scott hands the treasure hunt over to the resident libertarian on the show, who was played as a dangerous buffoon. And there was an Indian American comic on the show who, again, in anything resembling real life, he would have been beaten to death savagely on a weekly basis, but I suppose in the same way that in anything approaching real life, Michael Scott and Ed Helms' character on The Office would have been beaten to within an inch of their lives on a weekly basis. But it turns out that Ken Tremendous, aka Michael Schur, has very strong feelings about Thanksgiving, and they're not positive feelings. Here's a tweet storm from him. You have been conditioned from birth to think Thanksgiving food is good and important. You never had a vote. It's a religion, and you were indoctrinated. It's not fair, and it's not your fault. There is still time. Start over. Think about what you're eating. It's just not good. Now, such is my experience with Twitter that I see something like this and, oh, I get it. He's trolling us. People like to complain about Thanksgiving. They like to complain about distances they have to travel and being put up in relatives' houses, or alternately an onslaught of relatives, and all of the fuss associated with cooking the Thanksgiving meal. And some people like some of it, and some people don't like some of it. But no, Michael Schur is entirely serious about this. Back to the sermon. Your parents or relatives told you this meal was more important than other meals. This meal matters for family reasons and America reasons and nebulous other reasons. It was a big deal. You had to dress up and your cousins came over and there was no school. It mattered. And year after year, you dressed up and your cousins came over and you ate this meal, the important meal. And year after year, you secretly thought, why? Why is this meal so important? You'd had turkey before, obviously, but this turkey is better somehow. This turkey took hours to cook, and everyone made a big deal about it, how great it was and how incredible the cooks did preparing it. And you tasted it, and it was turkey. And then you had the mashed potatoes, and they were good because they were soaking in butter, but also you'd had those before. You hated the green beans and didn't eat them. Someone insisted you have cranberries, and you tried them, and they were nasty and awful. I should clarify here that the stresses that I'm giving to his tweets are indicated in the text. To continue, everyone talked about the stuffing, how it was the best part, and oh my God, the stuffing, and you have to try the stuffing. So you did, and it was gross and dry and had a billion herbs that made you feel like you were licking a forest floor. And then everyone talked about the gravy. Oh man, the gravy. So you poured gravy on a little part of your turkey, and it was thick and goopy, and it made the turkey taste different. At least it wasn't so dry, but why was everyone losing their minds? You had some turkey and some potatoes and skipped right to pecan pie and ice cream. And as all the adults told each other that this meal was incredible and this meal was just perfect and we can't wait for leftovers tomorrow somewhere down deep, you knew they were wrong. You weren't old enough or confident enough to stand up to them, but you knew it was fine. Some of it, the cranberries and green beans and stuffing, were straight up gnarly. But you said nothing because they kept saying, it is amazing. Now you've grown up. You can control your own life. You can break out of this horrible circular trap. You can admit now what you've always known. It isn't worth it. It's not that good. Most of it is bad. It takes days to make. It isn't worth it. You can keep up the lies and fake enthusiasm if you want. The turkey is so moist. The potatoes are so fluffy. The stuffing is Mom's recipe, and she always made it the best. The cranberries are adequate. Not even Orthodox Thanksgiving acolytes can claim cranberries taste good. Or you could admit what you've always known, what you knew years ago when you were a kid. This meal is worse than almost every other meal you're going to eat this year, and it will have taken 1,000 times as long to make. Break out of the prison you're in. Open your eyes. Start fresh. Also, there's a pandemic, so just everyone stay home. I guess I hadn't, until I had read this yesterday, I didn't truly understand how much Michael Schur hates America. He married Regis Philbin's daughter in a Catholic ceremony. Schur is Jewish. I don't know how relevant that is, but what led to this extraordinary invective against Thanksgiving? Is it the fact that it is an American holiday? Is it perhaps it is the premier American holiday, even greater than Christmas? Is it because it is tainted by colonialism? Now, I suppose it's true enough what he says about Turkey, that if Turkey were really that popular, people would be roasting turkeys, cooking turkeys all year long, but turkey seems to be largely confined to Christmas and Thanksgiving. It also serves for some people as a substitute for ham because it is lean meat. But is it the idea of community that he hates, of being forced to associate with people that he would not ordinarily choose to associate, relatives, including cousins? Or is it the fact that there is obviously a certain amount of play acting involved in this, as there is in all sorts of social conventions? If the turkey and stuffing are dry, but mom has obviously put herself out, you're not going to make a fuss about how you didn't like it, that it was dry, because that would be rude and hurtful. But this is the worst meal that you're going to eat all year. Given that, given the kind of meals that we eat these days, and the meal could be, I don't know, an extra large bag of potato chips, and that counts as a meal because we're too lazy to do anything else. Is this really the worst meal that any American is going to eat all week? I mean, I can put up with cranks so long as they understand that they are being crankish. But you notice the moral tone to his rant, that I am better than you, that I have brought the tablets down from Mount Sinai, and here are the 10 commandments against Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving meals. What a creep. Let's see. Let's look at the chat here. Jim Bowden says, hi, KMG. Hot day here in Sydney, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. You reminded me of a record which I once owned. It was a flexi disc which came with Private Eye magazine, and it was Barry Humphries describing a traditional Australian Christmas. And he keeps mentioning the temperature, and it's killing them. And the temperature's reached 130 degrees, and they're all just dying. And now we're all going to tell spine-chilling ghost stories. Absolutely hilarious. Jokerkin666 says, I bought an 11-pound turkey, $35, small ham, $15. That seems high. Tim Humphrey says, there's upside to Parks and Rec. Ron Swanson became a pretty cool meme. Yeah, I guess he did. But the big joke was that he was so autistic that everything that he did was wrong and particularly dangerous. That all of the things that he liked to do, or liked to do best, typically involved grave physical danger to everyone around him. Let's see. Peer-reviewed expert bra says, does KMG even peer review, bro? Okay. Paul Casso says, 88 says, The West Wing is the most overrated TV show ever. Parks and Rec is up there. I watched 2 EPs and I was out. Now, I'm thinking of that fellow who is Aziz Ansari. Okay, so this is some town in Indiana, is it? And they don't have a lot of money for the Parks and Recreation Department, especially since Leslie Knope is so ambitious with her plans. This fellow does no work, and he makes it clear to everyone that he does no work. He doesn't. He has all these stupid entrepreneurial ideas, which are really, really stupid. But instead of everyone hating him, they all seem to like him for some reason. There is also a woman on the show called Retta, who is morbidly, grotesquely obese. But we are supposed to believe that, all the men are just crawling over each other to get with her. Again, wish fulfillment fantasies for wine ants, in this case, morbidly obese ones. Okay, what else do we have here? These people are terrible at gaslighting, says Walrus Lawbertarian. Adris Dudu says, so his mom was a shitty cook, basically. Well, I don't know. Let's assume that it was the worst meal that he ate all year. I'm going to give him that for the sake of argument. Is it really too much to make a fuss over mom once a year when she has put herself out for everyone? Does this saying things you don't believe in order to be polite, does this offend Michael Schur's sense of honor, his sense of justice? Jim Smith says, wait, I say cranberries taste good. I'm not fond of them myself, but I know that cranberry juice seems to be a moderately popular drink. Dan Allison says, civic semi-Christian traditions are always worth it. I don't know. Maybe Michael Schur has seen the famous Norman Rockwell painting of an American family at Thanksgiving, and this disgusts him to the core. There was a black, and I mean specifically black, and I mean specifically kind of Black Power version of Rockwell's painting that came out a couple of years. I don't know whether you ever saw it. It's absolutely hilarious. Justin Proto says, this is like a Mad Lib replace meal with Obama administration. Metatron says, hating America is the hip thing on the streets now, yo. Again, let's look at Michael Schur. That this is a fellow who has, become rich, obviously, writing sitcoms. And in order to be successful doing sitcoms, you have to have a fairly broad audience, and that includes the sort of people who like Thanksgiving. So why bite the hand that feeds you? David Wright says, Thanksgiving is tainted by Norman Rockwell's America. Some of our Jews can't live with it. Irving Kristol made a point years ago about, how would you say, religious coexistence in America. And he was talking about New York specifically. The Irish have the Irish have St. Patrick's Day, and, stores close. Irish shopkeepers, would close stores. But the Jewish shopkeepers, they'd have their high holidays, and they would close their establishments. And both sides didn't seem to have a problem with this. You do this for me, I'll do this for you. You have your celebrations, we have our celebrations. There's a compact there that seemed to work pretty well. But Schur, I guess, is saying that he's not willing to play along with this compact anymore. Visionary Companion says the Aubrey Plaza Tiffany with a Y routine is a takedown of barren postmodern bimbos. Uh, yeah, I suppose I would have liked Parks and Recreation better if there was an attractive woman in it. And again, Aubrey Plaza's character engaged in the kind of behavior that would lead to trouble, to serious, serious personal trouble, perhaps disaster. Hikmah Warrior says some people cannot fathom the importance of ritual from Sanskrit RTA, or way, road, where we get the word root. Again, Half Galician makes another reference to Norman Rockwell's America. Was Norman Rockwell's America really bad for people like Michael Schur or Michael Schur's parents? I can't see that it was. Halper, this claim about a fair election is disputed. I'm just, there's no end to how far you could take this. That you could tweet that this is the Xth anniversary of the murder of the princes in the Tower by Richard II. And then, of course, Twitter would run a line, this historical claim is disputed. Pretty much like all historical claims, as it turns out. Head McNeck says, I actually think Aubrey Plaza is drop dead gorgeous. Okay, I wanted to talk about the wit and wisdom of another person, Martha Nussbaum, and I've been reading about her, and she will come up tomorrow when I discuss Claire Ellis's book, The Blackening of Europe, Part 1, because Martha Nussbaum is the doyenne, if you will, of cosmopolitanism. That is to say, of the destruction of the nation state and, our allegiances to it, allegiances to a nation state, allegiances to particularities are wicked, according to Martha Nussbaum. Of course, I'd heard about this woman. Her name is dropped. Endlessly. She is one of the great minds of our time. According to Wikipedia, she has 62 honorary degrees from colleges and universities in North America, Latin America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. And is there just a short list of people who just keep getting these awards? 62 honorary degrees? So I decided to read some of her work outside of the subject of loyalties, particular loyalties, or their opposite, cosmopolitanism. And I came across one of her books. I guess she's written a lot of books. One of her most influential books, which is about sexuality. Sex and Social Justice, it is called. And I just, one sees references to feminists or, quotations from them, but I haven't, not for decades have I made a habit of reading feminist books in their entirety. And so I decided to read from Sex and Social Justice. And my experience with this was, what was it that George Orwell said, that there are some things that are so stupid that only intellectuals could believe them? And this is the case with Martha Nussbaum, that she was talking about the claim made by feminists that sexual intercourse is about domination. Now, I know this is a very weary subject. Feminists have been arguing for years about this question of domination in sexual intercourse, and some have advanced the theories that we should stop talking about penetration, but instead speak of engulfment. Too funny. So Martha Nussbaum decides to deliver her verdict on this fraught question. And she says that intercourse between what many societies construct as male and what many societies construct as female has this feature, that is to say, domination. Oh, between people that many societies construct as male and what many societies construct as female, you mean all societies in known history? Are you talking about those societies, Martha Nussbaum? A large part of this book is basically a justification for transsexualism. Only a profoundly silly and stupid person could employ such phrasing as what many societies construct as male. But here's another one. Genital organs, in short, do not interpret themselves. They do not announce to their bearers what they are and what is salient about them. This is staggeringly fatuous, and I would like to see Martha Nussbaum's list of bodily organs that do interpret themselves to their bearers. Oh, yes, your heart. Do you feel that? That's called your heart. What does the heart do, mommy? Okay, well, the heart pumps blood throughout your body. Why is that important, mommy? Okay, and you could talk about, you talk about your liver, your kidneys, your spleen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. None of these announce to their bearers what they are and what is salient about them. But she's making the argument that, of course, the purpose of genitals is a social construct. Oh, okay. So penises produce semen, and that would have no particular purpose in human life unless it was socially constructed. And how exactly would this be socially constructed? With paper mache? Or some similar thing? The people who are considered intelligent in our society, well, one laughs lest one weep, as Gogol wrote. Further on Thanksgiving, and I guess we get these stories every year, but we're going to get more and more of them, and maybe something will happen. This is from Tom Sakata at Breitbart. During a recent guest lecture at Washington State University, Portland State University professor, Portland State University, which is the Oxford of the West Coast, is it? Perhaps it's the Cambridge of the West Coast. Professor Cornell P.W. I may be mispronouncing this. It's not intentional. Told students that Thanksgiving should be replaced with a national day of mourning. Now, this is not as ridiculous as it sounds, because essentially amongst the elite, Columbus Day has disappeared. It is now National Indigenous Day or some such. P.W. told students that Thanksgiving is based on offensive stereotypes of indigenous people. There are various alternatives to Thanksgiving, he said. This includes acknowledging the National Day of Mourning, U.S. Congressional Resolution, and Day of Atonement. Schools should ban Thanksgiving as a holiday and instead call the time off fall break and celebrate indigenous culture. He explained the steps of settler colonialism during the lecture. Is the colonization of the United States no longer taught in American schools? Perhaps if it were taught, then we wouldn't need for people students to be taught about settler colonialism, because it's baked into the cake, as it were. Let's see. Steps 1 through 4 involved taking indigenous lands, children, religion, and languages away from indigenous people. Step 5 is eliminating indigenous ways of teaching and learning. Step 6 is debating concepts of tribal sovereignty. Step 7 includes falsifying or rewriting history. The last step is assimilation, where indigenous people are coerced to engage in Western research protocol and practices. Was he coerced in engaging in Western research protocol and practices? Assimilation, that has not been the goal of either Canada or the United States. Otherwise, Indian reserves would not have been established. One of the main reasons for the establishment of Indian reserves is that these aforementioned colonialists understood that in the absence of reserves, the Indians would be totally assimilated and they would essentially disappear from the earth. Before I move on to Martha Nussbaum, I'm looking at a picture of her, which is on Wikipedia. And she's 63 years old, and she's wearing one of the strangest things that I have ever seen. I suppose you could call it a shift. And it's a print. It is a pretty lurid print, and it is a miniskirt shift. And we get a good look at her legs, her 63-year-old legs. I don't know whatever would have persuaded her that this was something that she should wear in public, given her age. But I don't know, perhaps that I'm impressing a social construct on female beauty or the appropriate nature of clothing for elderly women. Let's go back to the chat here. What is your educational background, KMG, says Adam? I don't have any. I'm a high school graduate, and I'm a university dropout with a year of university. Hickman Warrior says functionally, yeah, okay, I'm not going to repeat that. You wise men don't know how it feels to be thick as a brick, says Dan Allison. A Jethro Tull reference. Yes, I remember when that record came out that there was a lot of pondering about it, that Ian Anderson had something major to tell us. Hickman Warrior says, was she hatched? Yes. So many of these feminists, well, and I would say members of the elite generally, seem to carry on as if asexual reproduction in human beings has been perfected. That, of course, what Andrea Dworkin famously believed that all intercourse was rape, and I believe that Catherine McKinnon's view of this is not all that far removed. It's insanity, you know. But when insanity is not called out, but is instead rewarded, well, what do you get? You get more insanity. Visionary Companion says she was profiled in a documentary about modern philosophers, along with Cornel West, Avital Ronell, etc. She came across as a disordered lightweight. Ronell is a psychotic. Yeah, so is Andrea Dworkin. I'm sorry, Richard III, not Richard II. Andrea Dworkin was obviously psychotic, but she's surely one of the most quoted women of the 20th century, and perhaps beyond. Head McNeck corrects me on physiognomy. Okay. They don't produce it. They're just a carrier of it. Okay. Okay. What else do we have here? Nussbaum chose to tell the interviewer in a documentary about modern philosophers about the time she teased her law professor dad by showing up at his lecture in a sexy outfit. Very odd indeed. Well, when you look at someone like Martha Nussbaum, and she's carrying on about reproduction and the politics thereof, I think it's important to mention that she is childless. And I would have to guess that this is almost certainly by choice. Emmett Kelly's Earth says the post-war U.S. Indian policy was to terminate the reservation system, the unfortunate word used, favored by liberals and conservatives. It was stopped by Nixon. Well, in Canada in 1969, Jean Chrétien, who later became Prime Minister, who was at that time the Minister of Indian Affairs, he came out with a government paper which advocated the end of the Indian Act, the end of the reserves, that Indians were going to be treated just like all other Canadians, and essentially the restrictions placed on them would end, but the privileges granted to them would end as well. And there was such a howl of protests from the Indians that it was quickly dropped, never to be mentioned again. Indians in my country receive per capita between the federal and provincial government something like about $10,000 per year. That is per capita. Enron says, an autodidact, Kevin, I suppose so, for good and ill. Debereas says, hello, you wonderful people. Well, hello to you. Steve says, tell Muslims they need to spend their holidays contemplating the aggressive ways of early Arab caliphs and seeking atonement from the people whose lands they conquered. Yeah, when the Muslims start talking about, the Crusaders, and they start talking about the peaceful nature of their faith, I want to respond. So how was it that Islam went from Arabia to the gates of Paris in 100 years? Missionary work, was it? Your mama says, how large is the largest Indian reserve in Canada? I could not tell you that. Big difference between Indians in the United States and Indians in Canada is that there are a lot of Indian reserves next to Canadian cities, unlike the United States, where most Indian reserves are out in the wilderness. As a result of this, you had, going back decades, a large number of Indians sort of wandering into the cities and deciding to stay there. Until 1960, Indians were not allowed to leave the reserve without permission of the Indian agent. But now, half or more Indians in Canada have left the reserve. They still get their benefits, though. This seems to be the unofficial policy of the Canadian government, that since their benefits are portable and the Indian reserves are often awful places, they are corrupt. The money that they're given, that their chiefs are given, are pissed away or stolen. And the idea is that they move to the cities and the Indian reserves will wither away. That seems to be the plan. Okay, so coming up next. Oh, yeah, one more thing about Thanksgiving. You all know the meme about vegans. Have I told you I'm a vegan? Yes, about half a dozen times in the last 10 minutes. Well, I guess with the rise of the Pride movement, we had the homosexuals doing that. But the transsexuals want in on this action. Why aren't you talking about trans people? Why aren't you talking about them right now? Why would you ever talk about anything other than trans people? Because this is the most important subject on earth. Oh, and the pain and the misery. There's so much pain and misery associated with the transition. Why would people decide to go through with it rather than simply be uncomfortable with their bodies or suffer, as the scientists call it, gender dysphoria, as Abigail Schreier demonstrates in her book, Irreversible Damage? Almost none of the female to male transsexuals in the United States have demonstrated gender dysphoria. They apparently just come to the conclusion that that being female is largely worthless. This is from Penny Starr at Breitbart. A left-wing writer on a website devoted to sex, abortion, parenthood, and power abortion and parenthood, they seem to be mutually exclusive, is encouraging readers to confront trans exclusionary radical feminists, or TERFs, during Thanksgiving gatherings, including physical confrontation. The Rewire News Group says, talk about how gender-affirming care is necessary and life-saving treatment, and trans people should be entitled to it the same way you're entitled to your colonoscopy, Aunt Karen. Yeah, colonoscopy. Okay, because there's something bad growing in your colon. Healthy breasts are not a disease. Explain to your relatives that whether someone has medically transitioned, their gender is valid. This raises very serious questions for the whole gay project. Oh, these people say, we are immutably gay, or we are immutably lesbian. But that seems old hat now. It's on a spectrum. And people feel this way or the other, and they go back and forth. You have all these people who are non-binary. But of course, it's all nonsense. I mentioned this example before, but let's look at Chastity Bona. That she announced that she was a lesbian, and this was immutable. You know, this was stamped on her, as it were, from conception? But then she decided that she wasn't a lesbian, she was actually a man, and we were told that that was immutable too. More from the Rewire News Group. Too long didn't read. If you've got a TERF in your holiday midst, you can have a couple of options. You can engage, you can ignore, or you can, as we've stated, launch assorted foods across the table until they retreat. And there is a picture of a woman from a sitcom being splattered with blood. Yeah. So what can you do if there's a TERF at your Thanksgiving table? We've got some ideas. Throw the turkey at them. If you do not have the upper body strength to throw the turkey, you can opt for something slightly easier to lift, like a handful of mashed potatoes or some stuffing. A pie also works and offers an added comedic effect. Wow. So you can get away with advocating that men attack women so long as these men say that they are women. Wow, feminism has really not worked out the way that it was supposed to, is it? The lesson here is quite clear. Stay away from trans people at all costs, because there's nothing to be gained from associating with them. Because at least as far as male to female transsexuals go, thoughts of violence, of revenge, never seem to be very far from their minds. Let's talk about Jordan Peterson. He has a new book coming out, a new book of rules. So he is back from the beyond, back from the Slav world, and he's here to sort us out again. And this has caused some difficulty. John Nolte at Breitbart. Several Penguin Random House Canada employees confronted management about the company's decision to publish a new book by controversial Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson at an emotional town hall Monday, reports the far-left Vice News, and dozens more have filed anonymous complaints, according to 4 workers. Peterson's latest book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life, a sequel to his 2018 cultural blockbuster, 12 Rules for Life, is set to hit bookstores in March. It somehow gets worse. One person told Vice people were crying in the meeting about how Jordan Peterson has affected their lives, and that person discussed how Peterson had radicalized their father, and another talked about how publishing the book will negatively affect their non-binary friend. Is being non-binary immutable too? People were crying. They were crying during a work meeting, crying non-binary. What does that even mean? You know what? I don't want to know. Don't tell me. I know it's just stupid. The richest, most privileged generation in the history of the world, spoiled babies who carry access to the world's knowledge, access to almost every book ever written and movie ever made in their pocket. They're crying at work. Food is cheap, energy is cheap, healthcare is verging into miracle territory. They enjoy free time unlike anyone has ever seen. Maybe that's the reason why they're crying, because this Nolte is describing a materialist paradise. But that's not enough, and does not live by bread alone or broadband internet or cheap frozen pizzas. I can get a bruschetta pizza from Walmart for, what is it, $2.97. It's pretty good. But somehow that doesn't address the question of the death of God, does it? Back to Nolte. These people live in a country so tolerant the media are forced to invent fake hate crimes, and still these squealing little gerbil crybabies are crybullying because a book publisher is going to publish a book that contains ideas they disagree with. Random House knew this was coming. The company is so aware it allowed a bunch of spoiled fascists into its house, the company said in a statement. Immediately following the announcement, we held a forum and provided a place for our employees to express their views and offer feedback. Our employees have started an anonymous feedback channel, which we fully support. An anonymous feedback channel. You mean like at the New York Times, where you have employees attacking each other anonymously by name? That just sounds like the best way to have a harmonious workforce. Oh, and Penguin Random House will buy Simon & Schuster Penguin. It was once a great British company. Random House was once a great American company, as was Simon & Schuster. They're all owned now by the German media giant Bertelsmann. Jordan Peterson's story got really weird, and not to go all Vox Day on you, but I have to say that when he described the sort of things that Peterson was talking about, particularly his occult experiences, which he seemed to dwell on, the depth of detail that he described of these horrific dreams that he was having would indicate that either he was making it up or that he was keeping a dream diary. As Strindberg and others, Huisman is another example, could testify, stay away from the occult. Stay away, as far away as you can. Let's see. According to Wikipedia, 2016, Peterson had a severe autoimmune reaction to food and was prescribed clonazepam. Is that what happened? In late 2016, he went on a strict diet consisting only of meat and some vegetables in an attempt to control his severe depression and the effects of an autoimmune disorder, including psoriasis and uveitis. In mid-2018, he stopped eating vegetables and continued eating only beef. In 2019, his prescribed dosage of clonazepam was increased to deal with the anxiety he was experiencing as a result of his wife's cancer diagnosis. Starting several months later, he made several attempts to lessen his intake or stop taking the drug altogether, but experienced horrific benzodiazepine withdrawal syndrome, including akathisia, described by his daughter as incredible, endless, irresistible restlessness bordering on panic. I don't know that his daughter is a reliable witness. According to his daughter, Peterson and his family were unable to find doctors in North America who were willing to accommodate their treatment desires. So, if you go to your doctor and you're suffering all these things and your doctor says you have to change your diet, and you say, I'm not going to change my diet, well, isn't this rather the situation that has been described with regard to those people suffering from anorexia nervosa, that they demand that doctors simply do what they say. The same thing with trans people. Do what we say, gender affirmative treatment. If you're not going to listen to what the doctors say, why are you complaining about them? In January 2020, Peterson, his daughter, and her husband flew to Moscow for treatment. Doctors there diagnosed Peterson with pneumonia in both lungs upon arrival, and he was put into a medically induced coma for 8 days. So these North American doctors didn't notice that he had pneumonia in both lungs. He spent 4 weeks in the intensive care unit, during which time he allegedly exhibited a temporary loss of motor skills. Several months after his treatment in Russia, Peterson and his family moved to Belgrade, Serbia, for further treatment. In June 2020, Peterson made his first appearance in over a year when he appeared on his daughter's podcast recorded in Belgrade. He said he was back to my regular self, other than feeling fatigue, and was cautiously optimistic about his prospects. He also said that he wanted to warn people about the dangers about the long-term use of benzodiazepines. In August 2020, his daughter announced that his father had contracted COVID-19 during his hospital stay in Serbia. 2 months later, Peterson posted a YouTube video to inform that he had returned home and aims to resume work in the near future. It seems to me that extreme diets are very often associated with extreme mental distress. Let's see. David Futrell writes, have you heard what happens when he drinks apple cider? In the video below, he tells Joe Rogan that when he drank apple cider after going on his all-meat diet, it produced an overwhelming sense of impending doom and kept him awake for 25 days, as in literally no sleep for a month, which is literally impossible. While one young Frenchman with a rare disorder managed to survive on only a few minutes of sleep a night for several months, no one has ever gone completely without sleep for 25 days in the history of our species. That's more than twice the world record, which you think that Peterson, as a professor of psychology, would know, which led to my joke that number one on Jordan Peterson's 12 More Rules book would be, don't drink apple cider. It's poison. Someone drinks apple cider and experiences a overwhelming sense of impending doom? No, there's something else going on. Something else completely going on there. Are there Jordan Peterson fans in the chat? Peterson is putting a guide for life after this year as peak chutzpah, says half Galician. Yeah, I'd say it's hubris, certainly, no question about it. None of what he said about his condition makes any sense whatsoever. None of it. And when you couple that with his deep dive into the occult, that suggests an alternative explanation for his difficulties. I mean, the kind of stuff that he was describing in his dreams is the kind of things that would drive people insane. And one of the good things about dreams is that typically, no matter how intense they have been, you wake up and in a couple of minutes, they're gone. I've said previously that the saddest thing in the world is waking up from a beautiful dream. A couple of years ago, after I had seen her latest movie, I had a dream about the actress Greta Gerwig. No, it wasn't that kind of dream. It was just a kind of dream where you're holding hands and you're in love and nothing needs to be said. And I woke up and I thought, life is good. And then about 90 seconds later, wait a minute, did any of that really happen? And about 30 seconds after that, oh man. But that's, dreams disappear. They're evanescent. Unless you decide to fetishize them, like Jordan Peterson did, which I very much counsel against. Adam says, in a blatantly inverted culture, it's not surprising that the vulnerable and impressionable become confused about sexuality and gender. David Wright says, if I was Peterson, I would lay low for a good while. Money and fame still beckon this sad man. You know, there is a well-known process for this. You could call it the People magazine process. That, you know, celebrities get involved in some sort of scandal, maybe a whole host of scandals involving, you know, bad behavior and the like, or, you know, signs of mental collapse. And then they disappear. And, you know, they don't do interviews or whatever. Then they get a People cover story where they talk about their miraculous recovery, which they might attribute to God, or they might attribute to their new partner or old partner, or they might attribute it to some new form of treatment which has become available, or they might attribute it to finally having the courage to be able to love oneself, because that's the greatest love of all, right? Isn't that what Whitney Houston taught us? Okay. Jim Smith says, TERFs are the first group of radical feminists who I have some sympathy for. I have a great deal of sympathy for them. I interviewed one from the University of Victoria on my old podcast, and, you know, the men who had become women basically drove the women out of their spaces, as they called them, and taken over all of their organizations and said, you must listen to us. Essentially, we're better at being women than you are. Hikmah Warrior says, Roosh 5 is more honorable. Peterson still loves the gelt. Let's see, random pause. No, it's an awful shame that all of these great publishing firms, if you look at, you know, Collins, William Collins it's now HarperCollins, it's owned by Rupert Murdoch. What's happened at Peterson reminds me of what happened to Woody Allen with Hachette. And I really can't understand, particularly in this economic climate, where their employers don't say, shut the hell up. Or, you know what? Even better, leave. If this is so outrageous, leave. I'm sure there's a surfeit of well-paying jobs in publishing these days. You know what? We'll give you half a year's salary to piss off forever. How about that? Can't say fairer than that. Do you keep a diary, KMG, says SB. No, I do not. I suppose laziness would be part of it. I suppose another reason would be a temptation to rewrite the facts, you know, even at the end of the day, so they were less stupid or embarrassing. Hikmah Warrior says, Fathers of the Church counsel against visions, magic, etc. Indeed, they do. And it is wise advice. Brandon Smith, 13 rules for life. Rule 13, don't do what I did. I've traveled all over the world in dreams. Oh, these people get into these things like astral traveling and the like. It's witchcraft, pure and simple. Visionary Companion says, going public with a happy recovery is tempting fate to bring down the hammer again. Well, you know, Oscar Wilde famously counseled against hanging one's clean laundry in public. You know, see, this was an inversion of the traditional rule, but I think that Wilde was absolutely right there. I've noticed, and if you read the popular press, you may have noticed it as well, that when people go public talking about the strength of their marriage, it's rock solid, baby. Oh, sure, we've had our difficulties, but what marriage doesn't? Divorce? Unthinkable. We're in it for the long haul. Usually you get an announcement of a divorce from one or both of the parties within about 6 months of that interview. It's the marital equivalent of when the general manager says he has absolute confidence in the coach, or alternately, when the owner says he has absolute confidence in the general manager, you know that they are up for the high jump. Let's see. Enron says Greta Gerwig has disrobed a lot in her movies. I didn't think she was the type, but I guess they all are now. That movie that she made with Ben Stiller, the director, who she is now romantically involved with, made her gain 20 pounds for that role because at her natural weight, I guess she was too attractive for the character that she was playing. She was supposed to be, I suppose, the kind of woman who would, who was doomed to end up. I'm trying to remember the name of that movie. Stiller played an autistic character who's house sitting, and he is absolutely unbearable. And of course, Ben Stiller isn't that his thing? That he's just annoying. He's an annoying bodybuilder. That's a surprise to me about Ben Stiller. That, oh yeah, let's see your ripped abs again. Is that what you want to be known for? Why is that so important to you that you have to be showing this off all the time? It's not like you're going to be cast in action movies. I mean, that's not going to happen. Now that I've mentioned this movie, I'm going to, it's called Greenberg. It's called Greenberg, and it is written and directed by Noah Baumbach, who I'm quite fond of, actually. It's a good movie. I like it. It's funny, and I find Greta Gerwig to be absolutely adorable. As the character that she tends to play, as Mark from Peep Show famously said, good looks and low self-esteem, the perfect combo. So, now having talked about that, let's talk about Megan Mertz. Megan Mertz is in the news again. Now, of course, this would have nothing to do with the collapse of her defamation case against the Daily Mail. No. This is totally separate. From People magazine, Meghan Markle reveals she suffered a miscarriage in July and almost unbearable grief. In a moving account written in the New York Times. In the New York Times? Oh, okay. Why would this be in the New York Times? Well, apparently we're going to be gaslighted about miscarriages. Apparently, what was the word that is being thrown around here? Taboo. Sophie King, a midwife at UK child loss charity Tominys, said miscarriage and stillbirth remained a real taboo in society, so mothers like Megan sharing their stories is a vital step in breaking down that stigma and shame. So people never talk about miscarriage. They don't? Really? Didn't someone famous have a miscarriage recently? This from the Daily Mail. I'm amazed how often this synchronicity happens. That, Chrissy Teigen. Oh, what? She was in the mail again yesterday? Indeed. And she is still looking for clickbait from having a miscarriage, which I consider to be despicable. Chrissy Teigen says John Legend was very uncomfortable taking photos of her miscarriage, as well he might be, as he praises her for being courageous enough to share her grief, insisting it has made them stronger than ever as a couple. I seriously doubt this. Seriously, that it has made them stronger than ever as a couple. I've heard it said that men who attend the birth of their children very frequently have a substantial loss of sexual interest in their wives or girlfriend afterwards. Well, for a very obvious reason. The association of one's wife with death, particularly reproductive death, is not likely to make any couple stronger. Chrissy, 34, lost her baby boy on September the 30th when she was 20 weeks into her pregnancy after suffering a month of bleeding from a weak placenta. The couple chose to share a series of heartbreaking black and white images taken in the hospital, one of which showed Chrissy sobbing. Why are you showing this to us? I'm just going to take it for granted that that you were deeply affected by this. But no, we need proof. No, we don't need proof. In another image, John, 41, and Chrissy are seen cradling their son's body. Chrissy and John spoke to Good Morning America about the decision to share the images, saying they wanted to support others who have been through similar losses. John admitted that he was worried about taking photos and commemorating the pain, but said it was important to have something to remember their son by. What, your memories aren't good enough? The couple had decided to call their unborn child Jack and have been open about the grieving process on social media since suffering the miscarriage. In other words, it's an old story. I've suffered. Now it's your turn. I'll tell you what I really think. So we're supposed to believe that Megan Mertz, who is one of the most famous women in the world, who lives in Los Angeles, which is the world capital of the entertainment industry. And it is the world capital of the paparazzi. So that Megan Mertz was rushed to hospital in July, and none of the paps, none of the gossip columnists, they didn't find out about this. That no one, working for the ambulance service, working at the hospital, no one decided to make a few $100 or a few $1,000 by selling this story to one of the tabloids. Really? Am I supposed to believe that? No, I don't believe it. I don't believe it for a second. So we know that Chrissy Teigen's miscarriage was on September the 30th, and now Megan Mertz is saying, well, mine was in July. You see, so I'm not a copycat. Oh, no, quite the reverse. The ways of publicity are wicked. Is there any other way to describe it? Oh, so apparently, according to experts, 1 in 8 pregnancies result in miscarriage. So it is not that unusual. But so what else does Megan Mertz have to say in the New York Times? Well, let's hear a little bit. I recalled a moment last year when Harry and I were finishing up a long tour in South Africa. I was exhausted. I was breastfeeding our infant son, and I was trying to keep a brave face in the very public eye. Was it necessary for you to travel to the other end of the earth and keep up an exhausting schedule when you were breastfeeding your infant son? No, of course it wasn't. Are you okay? A journalist asked me. I answered him honestly, not knowing that what I said would resonate with so many, because you never give careful consideration to what you say to journalists, do you, Megan Mertz? Resonate with so many new moms and older ones, and anyone who had in their own way been silently suffering. My off-the-cuff reply seemed to give people permission to speak their truth. But it wasn't responding honestly that helped me most. It was the question itself. Thank you for asking, I said. Not many people have asked if I'm okay. Sitting in a hospital bed, watching my husband's heart break as he tried to hold the shattered pieces of mine, I realized that the only way to begin to heal is to first ask, are you okay? Okay, so what's the big picture here? It's coming right up. Are we? Are we okay? This year has brought so many of us to our breaking points. Loss and pain have plagued every one of us in 2020 in moments both fraught and debilitating. We've all heard the stories. A woman starts her day as normal as any other, but then receives a call. She's lost her elderly mother to COVID-19. A man wakes feeling fine, maybe a little sluggish, but nothing out of the ordinary. He tests positive for the coronavirus, and within weeks, he, like hundreds of thousands of others, has died. A young woman named Breonna Taylor goes to sleep, just as she's done every night before, but she doesn't live to see the morning because a police raid turns horribly wrong. George Floyd leaves a convenience store. Oh, that's all you're going to say about his encounter at the convenience store? Not about him trying to pass a counterfeit $20 bill and then getting into it? He could have given back the cigarettes and he could have walked a free man. But back to the narrative. George Floyd leaves a convenience store, not realizing he will take his last breath under the weight of someone's knee. Well, he wasn't realizing anything because he was out of his mind on fentanyl. And in his final moments, calls out for his mom. Now, he was calling out for his mom well before the policeman put a knee on his neck. Peaceful protests become violent. Health rapidly shifts to sickness. In places where there was once community, there is now division. On top of all this, it seems we no longer agree on what is true. When has that ever been the case, Megan Mertz? We aren't just fighting over our opinion of facts. We are polarized over whether the fact is, in fact, a fact. Again, this is not new. We are at odds over whether science is real. No, we're not at odds over that at all. What we are at odds over is whether what is claiming to be science is actual science. We are at odds over whether an election has been won or lost. We're at odds over the value of compromise. That polarization, coupled with the social isolation required to fight this pandemic, has left us feeling more alone than ever. Okay, yes. So, the sage, Megan Mertz, has some wise words for us. The New York Times, The New York Times. Yes. For some background on this, I'll go to the ever valuable Harry Markle site at harrymarkle.wordpress.com. And of course, Harry and Meghan are involved in a rather unseemly battle over Frogmore Cottage, which had to be refurbished at enormous cost for them to live in because they decided that the palace that they were living in wasn't good enough for them. And then they decided they didn't want to be royals anymore. And now another royal, Princess Eugenie, has moved in. But there is this lawsuit against the Daily Mail, which has been held over till next year, I think late next year, for reasons that are being kept a secret. What do the recent revelations tell us? What we find is that MM's new amended statements contradict her previous ones earlier this year, and this could be considered perjury as a witness statement that is entered into evidence is given under oath. That's why you sign it and state it is an honest and truthful statement. This is why vague wording is often used by those who wish to withhold information, so they aren't technical lying, but they fail to disclose facts that would help the other side. Why would Megan Mertz proffer information and change her story again, which has become a habit? Her legal team has attempted to halt the trial by applying for a summary judgment and has challenged the use of Finding Freedom, that's a book written about them, as evidence. It appears that neither tactic has worked so far, and the deadline for handing over discovery files has been extended twice. One could presume that in the discovery files, communications from February to August 2019 in particular, that the new information released would have been revealed. Thus, it is better to come out with it now to avoid any charges of perjury. Other than that, did someone put a truth serum in the water supply at Montecito? Or did Meghan get entangled in a lasso of truth by a lawyer. More than likely, she is admitting to some amended statements before they get called out as fibs, as the latest twists and turns in her preposterous plot seem to blame members of the royal family and their staff for convincing her to produce a public letter. It would seem that she doesn't have a case against the Daily Mail, and this sort of vexatious lawsuit typically leads to it not only failing, but you, in this case, Meghan and Harry, having to pay Associated Newspapers legal fees, which would be stupendous. It's the kind of thing that losing a defamation suit of this kind has many times led to bankruptcy and a disaster for those foolish enough to bring such a suit forward. I said I was going to talk about Lena Dunham, and I guess I'm going to have to talk about Lena Dunham. Again, what she describes, assuming that she's telling the truth, is a very, very sad story. But why do we have to know about this? Particularly, this story is called, it's in Harper's, which used to be a serious magazine. It's called False Labor, Giving Up on Motherhood. Is she given up on sex with men? Because the kind of thing that she talks about at considerable length in this confessional essay is the kind of thing that will put men off her forever. And we're talking about a pretty small pool there to begin with. She begins, the moment I lost my fertility, I started searching for a baby at age 31 after almost 2 decades of chronic pain caused by endometriosis and its little studied ravages. I had my uterus, my cervix, and one of my ovaries removed. Before then, motherhood had seemed likely but not urgent, as inevitable as growing out of jean shorts. Foolish mistake. Fertility is not like a spigot that one can open and close. But in the days after my surgery, I became keenly obsessed with it, bedbound, and tending to the 5 small laparoscopic holes in my abdomen, I scrolled through adoption websites as if they were furniture outlets. That is a telling admission. If I could no longer grow a baby in my womb, I could at least get one elsewhere, and fast. But there were a few obstacles. Some of the sites seemed too Christian to want me, others too back alley for me to want them. Plus, I could barely move, and I was tapering off opioids. So how was I going to handle a 6-week trip to some foreign country to collect the child that I did not doubt was my God-given right? It's funny how these people only throw around God when they're being selfish. I wasn't delusional enough to think that made sense, but wasn't there some sort of delivery service? When my family and friends told me to slow down, I insisted that they didn't understand. Worse yet, they were being ableist and old-fashioned. What were 5 holes in my stomach and a Vicodin habit 20 milligrams deep? Michael Jackson dangled his baby from a hotel balcony for everyone to see, and he got to keep it. Who was going to question me? That's a pretty low bar there for parenthood. Michael Jackson. As an interim measure, I adopted hairless cats because of course you did. I gave them the kind of names I'd give a daughter, classic with a twist. Irma and Gia Marie. Their suede-like texture and general clinginess could pass in the dark for the feeling of a newborn's warmth. I was weeks out of a nearly 6-year relationship, highly public and fraught with adult tensions, and I'd hurled myself into a renewed romance with the first guy I had ever really kissed, one that seemed miraculous in its seclusion and sweetness. My new boyfriend called the cats the little wontons, which I took as a sign that he would make a good father. Correct me if I'm wrong, aren't wontons food? Around this time, it became clear, first to everyone who knew me, and then finally to me, that I was addicted to benzodiazepines. The fact that I had myriad explanations for this dependency, among them chronic pain, heartbreak, the cracking of the brittle facade created by public life, didn't matter. Everyone has good reasons to stay in bed if you really think about it. And so I went to rehab, where I earnestly committed to becoming a woman worthy of the most fuck you baby shower in American history. Okay, so you suffer from a serious and painful medical condition. So what's your big fantasy about having a baby? Consumption, public consumption. People buying you expensive gifts and photographs of this being taken and published in newspapers and magazines. Okay, here we go. Let's see. The doctor gave me a bunch of new labels. With one functioning ovary, I was a good candidate. Without a husband, I was a solar starter. With a gay donor, I was a user of fresh homosexual sperm. With FDA ineligible jizz. I have no idea what she's talking about. I didn't know this when I chose my donor. If you find a hetero art school kid with a ketamine addiction, because of course he would have a ketamine addiction, otherwise, why would he be around Lena Dunham? Drag him off the street and convince him to say he's dating you. You're congratulated. If you carefully select an accomplished gay friend of childbearing age, you are taking a risk that the reproductive authorities won't sign off on. Couldn't you lie about this, Lena Dunham? It's not as if they're going to give anyone who walks into that little room where they're given the magazines in the cup, they're not giving them a gay test. Again, we know far too much about Lena Dunham. We know too much about her mind, her life, and too much, perhaps especially, about her body. I mentioned her show Girls before, and this got to be a meme that there were 4 of these titular girls, and 3 of them, they were all substantially better looking than Lena Dunham, but it was Lena Dunham who was always taking her clothes off. But enough of that. Enough of that. 2020, it's not only the year of thirsty women, it is perhaps more significantly the year of fraud. COVID panic fraud, and now election theft fraud. And as always, we go to the panic report, aka the Drudge Report. Ravens Steelers primetime game on NBC postponed after outbreak. Thanksgiving super spreader fear. We want to see the family. 2,284 deaths in a day. California cases jumped 17% in 24 hours. Ooh, AstraZeneca vaccine data isn't up to snuff. Anyone shocked by that? Did researchers mean to give a half-dosed? Operation Warp Speed leader may be out soon. Israeli military instructed to prepare for Trump strike on Iran. Yeah, okay. Because we all know that Trump is such a war monger. So leaving the panic behind, yes. Let's talk about snitching, what used to be known as reporting or journalism. There's a woman at the Toronto Star called Jennifer Pagliaro. I'm going to pronounce it in the Italian fashion. I don't know whether she does. Some people are touchy about this. One of the greatest players in the history of the Canadian Football League was a punter and place kicker for the BC Lions called Louis Passaglia. And Brian Hall, who was a Canadian sportscasting legend, I worked with him in Edmonton for a couple of years, that he was interviewing Louis Passaglia, and he kept calling him Louis Passalia. And he did it about 3 or 4 times before he said, look, it's Passaglia, not Passalia. And Brian Hall said, "It's an Italian name. It's pronounced Basalia." And the football player was almost beside himself at this point, and he said, "Are you telling me I don't know how to pronounce my own name?" But we have a crisis in Canada because a barbecue restaurant has opened. Yes, it's opened on consecutive days in a Toronto suburb. And yes, imagine that, a restaurant opening and selling food for people to consume inside. Yes, I know it's unimaginably wicked, but that's where we are. The latest, owner of Adamson Barbecue faces 9 charges after reopening restaurant for a second day. Police say Etobicoke restaurant owner Adam Skelly faces a total of 9 charges for bylaw violations over 2 days after he defied public health restrictions on indoor dining over the course of 2 days. Restaurants in Toronto and Peel region are restricted from serving customers indoors on patios to stop the spread of COVID-19. This woman, she took it very personally indeed. One might say that it was something of a crusade with her, or perhaps vendetta would be a better word. That the police didn't do anything essentially yesterday, and oh my, she was so put out. There was a couple of dozen tweets about this. I count about 24 people who appeared to be here to eat. Picnic tables set up. I responded, "I trust you got their names, addresses, and photographs and sent them to the police, their employers, and child services. The price of tyranny is eternal." Snitching. It just, there's people. They're eating at a restaurant. Where are the police? Why aren't the police arresting anyone? Who are these people? Oh, and apparently extreme right-wing groups are associated with this somehow. This is just some fellow who doesn't want to lose his business. Also, he likes, serving barbecue food to people, and somehow this has become a major Canadian story. And Jennifer Paliero, she is upset because apparently people have been sending her messages, tweets with mean words in them. Yes, I believe the word Nazi came up. Oh, here's another missive from the Toronto Red Star. This is from Bruce Arthur. "You need to separate the anger among small businesses with what happened at the Adamson barbecue. That circus and the frustrations of small business owners are not the same thing." Yes, indeed, because it is the duty of small businessmen in the Toronto region to go bankrupt, to lose everything they have, but to suffer with dignity. Well, with Toronto police still standing inside the restaurant, many are defying orders by eating outside on the Adamson Barbecue front lawn patio. The number of people here continues to climb. Police in the city of Toronto have obviously not shut the venue down yet today. Oh my God, people sitting on picnic tables. Well, what is it? The temperature in Toronto is, it's cold in Toronto, okay? It's cold in Toronto. It gets very cold in Toronto, indeed. But yeah, it's just shocking that I don't know. People are willing to brave the cold in order to eat hot food. Yes, takeout's all very well, but there's nothing like eating food which is fresh from the kitchen, is there? Yeah, it's freezing. It's freezing in Toronto, but it appears that Jennifer Paliero got her way, and this bad man who was serving barbecue to people sitting at picnic tables outside. Oh, Jonathan Goldsby who is a news editor at Canadaland, and another one of those who believes that the first duty of reporters or journalists is to be sneaks and snitches. A guy driving a City of Toronto pickup truck bumped fists with Kevin J. Johnston, who's banned from YouTube, facing a criminal hate speech charge and apparently now running for mayor of Calgary. Oh my God, it's a wilderness of mirrors. Is Gamergate involved in this somehow? I mean, what kind of people eat barbecue? Can we trust people who eat barbecue? Seems kind of a right-wing thing to do, doesn't it? I mean, dangerously right-wing. Oh, and the media has found a latrine walla who apparently doesn't want to bring the world to an end. Ontario's chief medical officer, this is from CTV News, did not lead the province's response to COVID-19. Ontario's Auditor General has concluded in a scathing review of the Progressive Conservative government's handling of the months-long healthcare crisis. Bonnie Lysyck's special report into the pandemic determined that Dr. David Williams did not fully exercise his powers under the Health Protections and Promotions Act, did not issue directives to local medical officers of health to ensure a consistent response, and did not issue directives on their behalf to Ontarians. For instance, it was the province, not the chief medical officer, that finally issued an emergency order in early 2020 to require masking for the general public. Can you imagine that? Elected politicians making decisions that affect all of us? I mean, that. Has the world turned topsy-turvy? Everyone knows that unelected bureaucrats should be making these decisions, must be making these decisions. Let's see. Media Hit says KMG's buddy James LaFond from Baltimore has some good ghetto grocery store stories from his manager's days. Yeah, I interviewed very interesting interview on my old podcast, which is you can still find out there on YouTube under Two Kevins. Justin Proto, the horror. These reporters sound like they're witnessing the Hindenburg. Oh, the humanity, or oh, the barbecue. Media Head says barbecue is what was served to Nelson Mandela when he visited New York City after being released from prison in South Africa. Of course. Oh, Metatron says barbecue is now a racist dog whistle. I'm going to tell you something which you're going to think I'm making up. I'm not making it up. Barbecue is black culture, which was appropriated, stolen by white people. That's not my view. That's just a common view amongst the sort of people who, those people. That's what they say. Justin Proto likes the blue jacket. It's not, I'm just wearing, what would you call them? Chinos. It's not a suit, actually. You can only see the top half in any event. Let's see. Media hits. Kat Dennings. I think Kat Dennings is a very attractive woman, actually. She was on that terrible show, Two Broke Girls, which really should have been called Life's a Bitch and Then You Die. I've seen her interviewed several times, and she seemed to me to be a delightful woman. Okay. Do we have anything else here? Ashley Graham. I wouldn't compare Ashley Graham with Kat Dennings. I would say that Kat Dennings is perhaps saftig, but she is not plus size, especially not professionally plus size like Ashley Graham. Do not forget the impeachment fraud, says Jerome Loftus. Yes, quite right. Quite right. Dristudo says Lena Dunham should get into speed or coke. She may have been on one of the girls' episodes. She and one of her gay friends, because of course she's a fag hag, They go nuts on cocaine. They go on a rather long jag, and Lena Dunham has no imagination whatsoever. So I just assume reflexively that everything that she does in girls is something that she has done herself. Jason Kenney, I was talking about him yesterday. Well, he buckled under the pressure. And he had a reputation when he first got into politics, or for some time thereafter, of being, one, a libertarian, and two, a social conservative. Well, he abandoned social conservatives quite some time ago. He boasted, and this is going back over a decade, that he was the champion of the gay Iranian refugees in Canada. Yeah, he boasted of that. Libertarianism. Yeah, it's too funny. But so I'm going to read you a little bit of the official statement on this. Okay, it's rather lengthy, but I'll just the things that I find the most significant: throwing hundreds of thousands of people out of work, deepening the mental health crisis. No, he's not in favor of that. It would also be an unprecedented violation of fundamental constitutionally protected rights and freedoms. Instead, we focused, as we've done from the beginning, on targeted measures aimed at places where the data clearly showed that COVID-19 was spreading. But the virus continues to spread. Its spread is picking up speed. Thank you to everyone, whoever, who has done their best. Once again, COVID-19 is not sentient. It has no agency. It's not a question of stepping up to the plate or anything like that. Not at all. Yes, and he's been forced into a difficult decision. He says, these steps are not being taken lightly, and I certainly didn't go into public service, nor did any of the people sitting around our cabinet table, in order to impose restrictions on how people live their lives. No, from my experience, is that that's precisely why people go into politics, in order to boss other people around. But we believe these minimum restrictions are needed right now. Okay. To wit, that's why, effective immediately, no indoor social gatherings will be permitted in any setting, and outdoor social gatherings will be limited to a maximum of 10 people. Let me repeat, no indoor social gatherings will be permitted, period. Oh, and this is the fellow who doesn't want to interfere in people's lives. This is the fellow who is worried about constitutionally guaranteed rights and freedoms. Yeah, I was going to invite a friend over. You can't. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean I can't? You can't. Okay. Because we say so. Oh. Famous Canadians on beliefs that they held that were upended by 2020. This is from Maclean's, which asked notable Canadians what this crazy, awful year proved wrong. Their idea of notable Canadians might be different than others. Amy Paul, leader of the Green Party of Canada, who is a black woman with a shaved head, completely shaved head, although to the best of my knowledge, she is not undergoing chemo therapy. And what does she have to say? There's been a growing perception that people don't care about each other, that people could no longer come together, that they were too self-centered and too self-involved to support one another. What we saw here and all over the world were people saying the opposite. Then you're an idiot. Because the message is every other person on earth is a direct, deadly threat to you. Wear masks, social distancing, social gatherings banned completely. That is the opposite of people coming together. Carla Gray, Sports Center anchor on TSN, who is a black woman, but she does not have a shaved head. That I needed more. Okay. Time and time again, I was reminded of how many tools, resources, and instincts I already have within me when it comes to setting out to do meaningful work. Yes, the greatest love is self-love. Once again, Whitney Houston taught us this, and look how it worked out for her. Aurora Brown, actor. I can't say I've ever heard of this woman. She is a white woman. I used to think that there would be big, satisfying endings in life. Now I realize you have to do things today. Waiting for someday is pointless. All of this stuff seems to come off of, Hallmark cards. Dr. Theresa Tam, who is Canada's chief latrine walla. What has she learned? Well, nothing personal. I didn't think it was possible to have a pandemic vaccine developed and clinical trials completed within a year. Yeah, we'll see about that. Without cutting any of the crucial steps in the process? No, they haven't been cut. This effort has essentially shrunk the time it takes to develop a safe and effective vaccine from 10 years to 10 months. Well, we don't know whether it is safe and effective, do we? Dr. David Suzuki, who is a Japanese man, the government's excuse that they didn't have massive amounts of money to put into renewable energy, retrofitting homes, public transit, etc. Okay. Alicia Elliott, Haudenosaunee author. And she is presumably a native Indian woman. And guess what? She has a very large ring through her septum. She has two very large earrings, beaded earrings, two of the ugliest earrings I ever saw. She has purple makeup around her eyes, which makes her look as if she has two black eyes. There's a widespread notion that a person's mental health is a private concern. Oh, here we go. I have mental health problems, so therefore you should listen to me. You should listen to me more than you would someone who didn't have mental health problems. And here is Priyanka, winner of first season of Canada's Drag Race, who appears to be an East Indian man who is dressed up as a woman. I always thought I didn't need alone time. But since the pandemic, I've realized that spending time with myself has energized my creativity more than ever. Selfishness, that's where it's at. James Jones, aka Notorious Cree, TikTok star and hoop dance artist. Definitely one of Canada's best known Canadians. Well, 7% of the population of Canada is Indigenous, and but 25% of this survey that I don't need much to find balance in my life. When the pandemic first hit, I thought losing the gyms, pubs, movie theaters, malls, etc. was going to be hard. But I found that all you really need is yourself to find happiness. More selfishness. The greatest love of all, once again, Whitney Houston's sage advice. Yes, we're all in this together, but we don't need to be all in this together because all we need is ourselves. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people. Not a single white male there. I tweeted to Maclean's magazine, are there any white males left in Canada? If so, why did you not include even one of them in this story? Serious question. I have yet to hear from them. Oh, so let's go. What's happening in the United States? New York City to have coronavirus checkpoints. Oh, no. It's not a question of escape to New York City, escape from New York City, escape to New York City. Well, why would anyone want to go there? You're not allowed to do anything there anymore, are you? Some resistance from Breitbart. Priest and rabbi file Scottish appeal challenging Governor Phil Murphy over worship restrictions. That's always good to know. Lockdown skeptics, Connor Chaplin, a rather touching cartoon. And it says unpublished sketch by Telegraph cartoonist Bob Moran. And it shows, one family meeting another family. And there is the hugging and children and close social contact. And it is labeled Risk It. No, but we can't do that because, as I was just explaining, man is not a social animal. All you need is yourself. That's all you need. Remember, the greatest love of all. He talks about the agreement for the Christmas lapse in Britain between the 23rd and 27th of December, again, which should be sufficient to end these lockdowns forever. That apparently we're in a crisis situation that's worse than it has ever been. Oh, well, you're going to set aside 4 days there when people can get together. So in other words, this is all just for show. Health Secretary Matt Hancock said in a joint session with the Health and Social Care Committee and the Science and Technology Committee yesterday that social distancing measures will not end until either everyone over 50 has been offered a COVID-19 vaccination or enough have taken it to bring the R number below 1. The health secretary said he hoped the most damaging restrictions could be lifted by Easter, but said that he depended on everyone on the first 10 groups of the vaccine priority list having been offered the jab by then. 20 questions to ask your MP. Why are SARS-CoV-2 antibody levels flat or dropping across all age groups since May if the pandemic is still going? What percentage of the population is assumed to have had prior immunity to SARS-CoV-2 in the SAGE forecasting models? Why do 50% of household members not catch coronavirus from infected persons with whom they live? And lots of other useful questions on that list. I mentioned the Canadian physician Roger Hodgkinson, and that he has done a 2-part analysis for lockdown skeptics called Who Failed and Why. He begins, the second part is called The Experts. Dr. Hodgkinson writes, the current heads of the CDC, FDA, and NIAID should be removed from office and replaced by nonpartisan experts approved by the U.S. Congress. Pragmatism should be the prime quality for the appointments, and there's still lots of that around. Academic medical credentials are required, of course, but should not be the only factor in the search. Dr. Fauci, in particular, has vacillated on matters of substance with his nightly hand-wringing in the media. He has also insisted on a formal double-blind trial for hydroxychloroquine, a drug with initial successes in France and an outstanding safety record, while thousands of people were dying. That opinion was classic for an academic, but in this crisis, he was totally out of his league, or gone wobbly, as Maggie Thatcher would have said. He also dressed up absurd modeling predictions by saying that they could happen, which of course the general public read as likely to happen, significantly ratcheting it up public anxiety. Oh, defiant Yorkshire salon racks up £27,000 fine. If these people don't pay these fines, are they going to be thrown into prison? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. Got to let out the real criminals, so that the COVIDiots, as they are calling them, can be incarcerated. But no, aren't the people being incarcerated being released? That creep Michael Cohen certainly was. Alex Berenson writes, wondering if your mask protects you? It doesn't. Wondering if it protects me? It almost certainly doesn't. Want proof? It's here. He's talking about the third part of his Kindle paperback, Unreported Truths About COVID-19 and Lockdowns, Part 3, Masks. A lawyer raises the question of whether efforts to limit private at-home gatherings are per se unconstitutional, based on the Due Process Clause and the Supreme Court's famous 2003 decision outlawing Texas's sodomy law. Very interested in what other lawyers think. And he is on Tucker Carlson's show tonight. What does Donald Trump have to say? He retweets the lawyer Lynn Wood. Thanksgiving Eve news. The 11th Circuit granted my emergency motion for expedited review of lawsuit challenging validity of Georgia election procedure. We the people delivered a historic landslide win. for Donald Trump in Georgia and nationally. We, the people, will not allow it to be taken. It is my great honor, Trump tweeted, to announce that General Michael T. Flynn has been granted a full pardon. Congratulations to General Flynn and his wonderful family. I know you will now have a truly fantastic Thanksgiving. Well, I'm glad to hear that. As many people have pointed out, he didn't need a pardon because he didn't do anything wrong. And the Department of Justice dropped the charges against him. But a rogue judge, Emmett Sullivan, decided no, he was going to keep the trial going by himself. You don't need an indictment anymore. He's a judge. He can do whatever he wants, apparently. And, oh yes, former National Security Advisor who admitted lying to FBI, say Dan Mangan and Kevin Breininger of CNBC. When the Department of Justice, the FBI, comes to you, with 50 different charges and say you're going to spend 1,400 years in prison, unless you plead guilty to this one thing here. And then, we'll arrange for you to spend 6 months in prison or whatever. The people take that deal. They almost always take that deal because if you don't, you end up financially ruined at the very least, as General Flynn was. This is from Breitbart. Joshua Kaplan. Paul Ryan declares U.S. election over in Euro banking conference talk. Because, of course, it would be a Euro banking conference talk. Paul Ryan, does he have a lot of experience in business? Does he? No, of course he doesn't. He's got a lot of experience in selling his country down the river. But now he's on the board of Fox. I think maybe even more important is that these legal challenges to the outcome and the attacks on our voting system really need to stop, in my opinion, Ryan said during Bank of America's virtual European credit conference. The irony is so thick there. The outcome will not be changed, and it will only serve to undermine our faith in our system of government, our faith in our democracy. Well, Paul Ryan did nothing about the massive theft that took place in the 2018 midterms, and I suppose he's not very happy about Trump, in effect, showing him up by deciding that, it's not necessary just to roll over and play dead. From Gateway Pundit by Christina Layla, Pennsylvania judge blocks state from certifying election results. Commonwealth Judge Patricia McCullough ordered the state to hold off on taking any further action to certify the results of the 2020 election, and there will be an evidentiary hearing held on Friday. There is, there's an argument going on the right about all these stories about evidence. Should we be paying that much attention to them because we're not really the people who are in a position to decide whether they are evidence or relevant evidence or not. Again, as I think it was Jay Valentine it pointed out at American Thinker, there are two types of evidence. There is common sense evidence and there is legal evidence. And in terms of common sense evidence, there is a 0.0001 chance that the election was not stolen. How that will play out in court remains to be seen, but I remain optimistic. Let's go to J5 Killer. He retweets Jack Posobiec, who had tweeted, Twitter has suspended Doug Mastriano after leading the PA Senate hearing today about election fraud. J5 Killer comments, not even trying to hide it anymore. He retweeted Carrie Kellerman, who wrote, in Pennsylvania, 1.8 million mail-in ballots went out and 2.5 million came back in. Oh, is that significant fraud? No, because Joe Biden has won, and it's going to be like Obama, only better, because everyone appointed to his administration is going to be a bloodthirsty neocon, a neoliberal, or is effectively going to be acting for the financial services industry. Some white pilling from Conscious Pixie. When Trump is victorious, he now has a large pool of loyal, true patriots to choose from to staff his administration. He doesn't have to take wags about staffing anymore. He now knows who he can trust. Doug Mastriano of Pennsylvania should be at the top of the list. I don't know. Can you appoint someone who has been, kicked off Twitter? That's an interesting legal point. Perhaps that will be adjudicated as well. Obama is very upset about the whole Trump administration, that he says that it will be difficult to unwind Fox News and Rush Limbaugh falsely claiming that white males are victims. All of these stories pretty much ignore the fact that America has had legal affirmative action for decades now, in which the only group that can be discriminated against is white males. Speaking of which, John Binder at Breitbart, Joe Biden is promising amnesty for over 11 million illegal aliens going to the Senate in my first 100 days. Well, since there's probably 30 to 40 million illegal aliens in the United States, I guess that would change the voting landscape at a stroke. And that's the plan. The plan is such that the Republicans, or more to the point, populists could never win another presidential election, and they find it difficult to win any national races, and increasingly any state races, because the Democrats are going to sign up this army, this instant army of 30 to 40 million illegals. Let's have a final look at the chat. Okay. John S. says, Ryan got a slot on the board of Fox News years ago. The fix has been in for a while. I like Robert Barnes. It says Quacha Lango. He has good election takes. Never heard Paul Ryan's name in a while. Well, he's been busy making money, hasn't he? You know, it used to be that a lot of politicians were lawyers, most of them, and then they go back into law after they left their political career, and they could make more money at it. You know, they've seen as rainmakers. But increasingly, what I've noticed in my country and in the United States, that people, they become consultants to law firms, ex-politicians. They don't know anything about the law, nothing. Oh, and they sit on boards of companies when they have no business experience whatsoever. So what are these law firms and these companies, what are they buying? They're buying influence. It's influence peddling. That's simple. Media hits on 2.5 Men. There was an Indian doctor that checked on Charlie at the hospital for his blood pressure. Was he a gross stereotype, like the gross racial stereotypes that on two broke women? I could hardly believe it watching that show. I have nothing against racial stereotypes, but you have to work a little harder than that. You have to make some sort of effort into delineating your racial stereotypes so they at least appear recognizably human. America, Emmett Kellyser says that America will be run by the Institutional Revolutionary Party North. I read on Monterey Peninsula College, and I think there's a great deal of truth to it, that America is not going to be the same, even assuming, God forbid, that Trump leaves office in January, because the media has been exposed, the pollsters have been exposed. It has been demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt that the elite hates Trump voters, all 75 million of them, how many of them, and wants them to disappear, but not before they're hurt, before they are seriously hurt. And that sort of knowledge it's not going to be forgotten. Tricky Who says the elites just want us to spend family time together because Nibiru is plummeting to Earth. Okay. All right. Let's see. Media Hit says, any good Pajit American Doctor sitcoms? There was this show that David Spade was on, and I've seen this show where he plays some guy who's like the ultimate pickup artist or whatever, and he has this hideous beard, and I don't know, he's like 50 years old, and he's this little runty guy to begin with, and he has the same obnoxious character that we've known ever since he was on Saturday Night Live. It was called Rules of Engagement. And of course, it was an Adam Sandler production. And I've seen a few episodes of that, and I thought, if you're Adam Sandler, you don't even have to try anymore. Everyone on this show was a gross caricature or completely obnoxious. And, oh, yes, the big problems between Patrick Warburton and his wife, Megan Price. And I'm thinking, I'm not, what's his problem? His wife seems decent enough, could have done a lot worse. But no, they're not even going to bother to come up with any real sources of conflict. But there was this Indian character on the show, played by an actor named Adhir Kalyan, and he was supposed to be some horrible person. He was by far the most likable person on the show. Oh, he's a nerd. Okay. If you're going to just posit that a character is going to be unlikable, don't you have to make some effort to actually make him unlikable rather than the opposite? But of course, I'm talking about the Adam Sandler universe here. As long ago as that movie, The Waterboy, which I guess I was bored one Saturday afternoon, and back when I had movie channels, this came on, and I must have been near catatonic or whatever, because I watched almost all of this. And I was thinking, well, to steal a joke from Charlie Brooker, that this film, The Waterboy, and so many of Adam Sandler's productions, they are Al-Qaeda recruitment videos. Okay, so MIDI hits Rules of Engagement with David Spade, a sleazy PUA with his Indian sidekick. That show was funny. We're going to have to agree to disagree. Media hits that Patrick Warburton was a goon. His wife was okay, but neurotic. He was a goon. His wife's a very attractive woman. And again, if you're going to, oh, yes, my wife, you're going to have to work a little harder for the audience to understand why he would have a problem with this woman who, again, seemed, seemed to me he kind of lucked out there, considering he's not a very likable fellow. Anyway, that is the show for today. Tomorrow is Thursday. It is Thanksgiving. If you do tune in, I will be talking about a Frank Capra movie on Theater Thursday called Meet John Doe, which stars the great Gary Cooper and Barbara Stanwyck. And it's a political satire, and a rather dark one, actually. And I couldn't help think of Paul Ryan watching it, because Paul Ryan is one of the people who sold the Tea Party down the river. Yes, you want something new, don't you, members of the Tea Party? Yes, we do. You don't want to be run by the normal crowd, the ones who are in it for themselves. No, we do not. So what you want to do is vote for the Republican Party. And what does the Republican Party stand for? We stand for war all over the globe for any and all or no reasons. Tax cuts for rich people. You're in favor of that, aren't you? You're in favor of being replaced by foreigners, right? Because that's more efficient. That's exactly what happened. to the Tea Party. And of course, it was the deliberate destruction of the Tea Party that led very quickly to the rise of Donald J. Trump. And so, if I'll be back on the air tomorrow, regular showtime, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to show any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. And again, if you like the show and you do not subscribe to my Twitter account, which is @KMG Victoria, I would appreciate that, given that Twitter seems to be determined to squeeze me to death by kicking off followers who have not chosen to unfollow me. If you would like to donate to this live stream, make a donation. I would greatly appreciate it, especially in these times of personal uncertainty. My PayPal account is at Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send money directly, donation via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I shall leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to find a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.